Lee here and welcome to episode 24 of Springwood. Today is the day that we begin work on the international and domestic airport of Springwood. And keyword is begin, because this project has become very, very giant. Now, I kind of expect us to smash this out over the weekend, maybe, bits and pieces throughout the week. No. It has taken ages and ages just to do the runways and the taxiways of this airport. So, over the next couple of episodes, expect a lot of airport work from me. I'm probably going to split it up into terminals and freeways and outskirts of the airports and, things like that, just to get the job done. This episode is going to feature a live play towards the end of the episode, and for good reason. The reason why I'm doing a live play is because, my city is based in the 80s, so I obviously can't have post-80s aeroplanes flying around my skies, and I didn't even really consider it until Bsqiklehausen got in touch and said he'd be really keen to make some planes for me. Now, he's taken it to the next level. These aeroplanes that he's created are just masterpieces, and not only has he just created some 80s style planes, but he's also created some Springwood Air aeroplanes, and he's chucked on a couple of different skins, logos of some airplanes that are now defunct and companies that don't run it anymore. So that's going to be featured a little later in the live play, and also you'll probably see little bits and pieces of those planes flying around in the time lapse. But yeah, these aeroplanes are amazing. I'm really keen for you to check them out, and they'll also be up on the Steam Workshop as I release this episode. In terms of what I'm doing on the screen right now, is I'm just sticking down the base of where I want my airports to go. Now, if you've checked if you watched my How to Build a Realistic City video I've released a couple of weeks ago, you will see that I always use Google Earth to model off what I'm building. Now, I usually model off places in LA and in New York. I'm staying right clear of those places for this airport because I really wanted to model an airport that was a bit more close to home, something that I was more familiar with, and also an airport that I actually really love the style of. So yeah, I'm actually building this airport based off the one in Sydney. This is Sydney International Airport, and the reason why I'm choosing it is I am actually really familiar with its layout, and I actually really like the layout of Sydney Airport. It features 3 runways, and it hits the water in this really interesting style, which I also really wanted to incorporate. I really love the layout of it. It has an international airport and a domestic airport really separated from each other, so that if you do want to catch an international flight, you do have to go to a completely different terminal rather than going to one that's attached to the domestic. There's a couple of bits and pieces that I really like about this airport. Another reason why I really like it is it has these canals, but they're not really canals. I guess they're more like rivers that run. They kind of like cut off the airport from the rest of the city, and I think in terms of Springwood, that fits in really well with the characteristics of the city. A couple of reasons. So that is the reason why I'm kind of choosing this layout. And also, you might kind of learn a couple of bits and pieces from, the airport in Sydney, and, it might interest you. You might learn a couple of things. I certainly learnt a hell of a lot from modeling and researching how airports work. Also, if you are an airport enthusiast, if you work at an airport, this might not be the episode for you because, let me just explain. First up, when I started making this episode, I did tons of research on how airports look and, the signage around airports and the different layouts of airports. And as I did all this research, I got deeper and deeper and deeper into how they are actually laid out, and the different bits and pieces that make up this, make up an airport. And it was so overwhelming, and the more I researched, the more I didn't want to build this airport. So, you know, at some point I just had to stop researching how airports operate and just dive into how I'm going to model. So, I mean, there's going to be a lot of inaccuracies in this episode, and you know, like it's just what it is. I try to stay true to a couple of things, but in terms of how realistic it is, like, it's probably sitting about a 30%, because I'm basing this off mostly pictures and you know, a bit of a Google Earth sort of images. So, I mean, here's my job for you guys. If you are an aviation, an airport enthusiast, hit me up in the comments. You know, if you see something that I do that you think I need to change, let me know. Keep in mind, I will change the little things and I'll change the easy things. But I mean, if I'm gonna change every little bit of detail that I miss in this, I'm probably not going to be able to move on to the next section of the airport. So, I mean, only hit me up with the things that are somewhat easy, because I, you know, as much as I want this to be realistic, I also want the job done. So, you know, if like lights are a little bit different, tell me. If if you want me to change the direction of a runway, tell me. But I mean, if you want me to change something that's going to take hours, I'm probably not going to do it. And also, if you are watching this for a bit of an idea of how to build an airport, this might be a pretty good tutorial for you, because yeah, I will get into how to use the tools that I'm using. You know what? Let's get into that now. So, this is my very first airport that I've built in City Skylines. I'm using a couple of different mods. First up, I'm using the mod Airport Roads, which allows me access to the runways and the taxiways of an airport. This is like a really easy mod to use, and the planes will land on your freeways. I'm gonna keep on saying that. We'll keep on landing on your runways if they are close to your flight path. I'm also using a ton of different assets made by Vaping24. He's an asset creator who's released a whole ton of different assets that are just perfect to create a really realistic airport. And he was one of the reasons why I really wanted to make such a realistic airport, because they are such realistic assets. He's actually released a whole bunch of signs for taxiways, and I was going to get into I was really going to get right into that, and but the whole idea of the signage just kind of got me really frazzled, and the more I got into it, the less I wanted to build it. You know the story. So I just decided not to go down that path, and I'm somewhat glad that I didn't go down that path. By the way, I'm also skipping. Oops, dropped my pencil. I'm also skipping a lot of this build because it is very repetitive. So if you're missing out on a little bits and pieces, stick around for the live play at the end, and I'll go into a bit more of what I'm building. So if you're here to get some ideas on how to build a somewhat realistic airport in City Skylines, first up, these yellow lines really help. These lines indicate where the aeroplanes will turn at various places along their taxiways. They kind of go in these real nice flowing angles, and mine aren't spot on. They could probably be a lot wider and longer, but you know, in terms of how much room, I mean how much space your airport's going to take up, you need to make that sort of compromise. These work pretty nicely, and as you can see, they take up tons of props, so you know, you do need to kind of be mindful of the fact that you are going to churn through tons and tons of props when you know, throwing down these lines. Also, when trying to build a realistic airport in City Skylines, it really helps to model exactly off a existing airport somewhere in the world. Because I'm going directly off the one in Sydney, it's really easy to figure out where all the lines, all the taxiways, and where all the runways fit. As you can see from this images right now, like I am modeling so closely, and measuring the gaps between the runways and the taxiways, and in between each taxiway, and it even really helps to get into the smaller details of what actually exists on the actual runways, and even around the taxiways. So that will help you out a lot when it comes to detailing. And particularly if you don't really know much about airports, like me, I really don't know much about airports, and I still don't. It just helps to build that realism, even though like in terms of an airport, it's probably not going to be that realistic. Like my airport is definitely not that realistic, and something I really struggled with when building it is the scale of the whole thing. Now, this actual airport, I feel like in terms of like the scale of itself and units, people walking around and the cars and the size of planes, it's probably in the right scale for that. But then in terms of the actual city, it's so big. Like it's probably almost the size of the entire city. That's a massive exaggeration, but like in terms of the downtown, it's actually way bigger. So just, yeah, I mean, it's kind of tricky to get your scales right when building something like an airport that is generally really big. And that's kind of where City Skylines drops the ball a little bit, is its scales and how big everything is. Right now I'm now starting to build a bit more detail on these runways. And as I kind of get through that, I will divert your attention to this awesome music that I'm playing right now. And as you all know now, Springwood is an 80s city, and it only seems fitting that I play 80s tunes in the time-lapse and in the cinematics. Now, 80s music might not be to your liking, you might absolutely hate it, but just bear with me for a second. My whole ideology of Springwood is to create a bit of an immersive experience, an atmospheric experience for my viewers. This is not a tutorial video, this is not a how-to video. I want you guys to experience what Springwood is as a city. This game allows you to get pretty detailed in terms of a city builder, or in terms of just a game in general. And thinking back to everything I've ever done in terms of creativity, I've always loved to create experiences for people. So, a game like this and a platform like YouTube is just spot on for what I want to achieve in my own creative space. So, it's awesome that I have people who are on board and who are interested in this sort of stuff in the first place. I've been pretty spot on with Springwood so far in terms of 80s, in terms of grunge, in terms of the feel of the city, but I've always been super unhappy with the music. Always super unhappy. I just never been able to get it right. Scoured the internet for hours trying to find the perfect 80s music to fit under a time lapse, under a commentary. It's so hard. And then you might find it, but it's not free, or you might find it, or you can't. It's copyrights. You can't, you don't understand. It's taken me I don't know, 10 months to find music that can actually be used in a time lapse on YouTube, and I've finally found it. So I hope you appreciate the music. I hope you're enjoying it. If you're not, just embrace it, embrace the tackiness, and even at the end of the time lapse, it gets super 80s. So just take note, sit back, relax, enjoy it. I've finished off detailing that little bit, and I kind of forgot to talk about the actual detail of that runway. Just take a look at these little pictures here of the runway I was modeling off. It's probably not 100% accurate, but in terms of how runways work, I tried to follow the lines pretty closely and pretty exactly, so that if it might not be totally accurate to a Springwood airport, it's accurate in terms of what an airport might look like. you know, numbers and lines and things like that. So, you know, I thought that kind of worked out pretty nicely. Here comes the favorite part of my build today. I've always wanted to make an underpass for a highway that goes underneath a runway. The one in Sydney features something like this that is super cool, and I always love driving underneath. I feel like every time I drive underneath, a plane is going over the top, and I wanted to create the same experience for my Sims driving around Springwood. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I kind of jumped into this with not really any experience, and luckily I found a couple of different assets that really helped me out building this area. What I'm doing is I'm using some of Ronix's blocks to just cover up a couple of different lines and to create a bit more of a base for this taxiway to go under. Something to note is that I build all this, and then it's not until a plane drives over it I realize that it's probably about 50% too small. So it is too small. I changed it off camera, so you'll see me build this one and then it'll suddenly just grow. So yeah, that's what happens. So it does become a realistic length, a realistic width. However, it's probably still not exactly, it's still probably too small, but I'm not going to change it now. It is what it is. On the topic of Runix, I started building this episode using the same same LUT as I always did, and then about halfway through, at about this point, coming up very shortly, you'll see a change in the color. Now I switch from my usual LUT, to Ronix's mod that he just released that's called Relight. If you have not signed up to that, I really suggest you go and do that. It's made this game look so much better. I think in terms of like shadows and lighting and how much control you have over how it looks, it's going to change pretty shortly. And you'll notice the change, and all the cinematics are in this change. I think it's tons better. I'm still playing around with the mod to figure out the best settings for my city, because I think every city is going to be different in terms of what colors you should use. But it's damn cool, and I think it's a must. It's one of the must-have mods. In terms of must-have mods, I have a mods and asset list below in the description. And of course, if you do like what you see in that mod and assets collection, keep me up with a comment or a like. That would be really much appreciated. I'm going to start getting into the detailing of this airport. A couple of different things that I do. Now, again, in terms of realistic, I don't know, guys. I don't know how realistic I'm being. I'm trying pretty hard, but at the same time, I'm also just going for it. A couple of things that I'm plopping down are, you might see some of those rectangular white boxes. I've noticed that a lot of airports have these little little boxes next to their runways and their taxiways. I stuck a couple of them down. I feel like they help to create that realism. Although these are actually benches and there's stripes on them, maybe just ignore that, but I actually think it adds to a lot. And I'm plopping down now just some different roads for some service vehicles. And I'm just totally basing this off the Sydney airport. I'm basically going exactly one-to-one for what I see off that airport. Every time I don't know what I'm doing, I just look back to the airport, and if I see something on the ground that I think I might be able to achieve, I just plop something down like that. I'm also trying really hard to break up a bit of the grey texture of these taxiways, because they do become really repetitive, but then at the same time I don't want to chuck down heaps of decals, because I just feel like sometimes decals don't really, first of all, you can't see them from really, really far away, and also they take up tons of props. This whole airport, it just churned through my prop limit. I was kind of far away, but now I'm getting kind of close. But don't worry about if I hit that prop limit. I do have a lot of plans for what happens if I do hit it. I think we're about to see the change in color. I'm pretty sure as soon as there it is. So as you can see, the color has gone to a little bit darker green, that grass. But in terms of the actual atmosphere and the feeling of the city, it looks a lot more realistic. And again, I'm going to just keep on playing with the different settings and see if I can achieve the best setting for this actual city. Again, if you are building, if you're trying to build a realistic airport using these these runways and taxiways, I highly suggest that you plop down the basics of your airport, of your taxiways, and figure out if your airport is functional first. Because I've done this off camera because I think it would have been pretty boring, but I placed down a couple of different things to make the airport functional, like some aeroplane stands, and just to see if it actually works before I get into the detailed part, and the different things I can do to make it actually work if it wasn't going to work. Thankfully, it actually works, and I was able to achieve all three runways being able to work. You'll see that in the cinematics at the end of the episode, and it looks really, really cool seeing all the airports in action, all the runways in action, I should say. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I'm also plopping down a couple of different shrubs and stuff, again, just to break down a little bit of the color, because it does get a little bit repetitive. We're now getting into the lights, and I'm using Vazimir 22's on his channel on the channel. God, you know what I'm talking about. But he's got some guides, so he obviously knows that his props and his assets are super detailed and quite complicated. I mean, if you don't know how airports work, you might find it very overwhelming. I did, but he actually helps you out a lot in terms of how they look and how airports should look. These lights around here that mark the taxiways is, there's a bit of a formula. So you can see me painting down higher density lights around the corners and the edges of the taxiways, whereas where the taxiways are a bit straighter, it seems to be like the lights are more broken up, a little bit more wider spaced out. So I was following that method, and again, probably not the most realistic, but it's not too bad in terms of the actual look of it. But hey, I mean, we're pretty much it for the time lapse. I'm going to scoot on into a bit of a live play and show you a couple of bits and pieces that I was not able to show you in this time lapse. So here's what we've been building in this time lapse. And as you can see, I have done quite a lot off camera, pretty much saving you a lot of boredom, because popping interchanges like this is very boring, and very necessary though for figuring out the flow of traffic coming into the airport. I will get into that very shortly. First, I want to show you some very, very awesome new assets hitting the Steam Workshop, and most importantly, hitting my city. We have Air Springwood. All these airlines have been custom made by Bsqiklehausen. He was pretty excited to be making some 80s style aeroplanes, and I'm so excited to have them as part of my fleets flying around. All these skins are custom made by him. I'm pretty sure no other airlines even have skins like this, but he's based them off 80s airlines. And these models here are really, really nice. I'm probably going to use them for domestic flights. This one in particular is probably my favorite one. It's the model is just so nice. I really love how thin this thing is. And of course, I got like the bigger model here that I'm going to be using for the more international flights. These ones actually have particular models, like they've got names for them, but I don't actually know the names, and I was about to look them up, but I decided I couldn't be bothered. So if you know these models, I mean, hit me up in the comments, and I'm sure we've got some airline guys watching right now. Bsqiklehausen couldn't resist making a strict toaster one. He said he already had the skin. A much larger airline. I really love this one. It looks awesome. We also have Royal Airways. We have CS Airlines. And then we have Transcon, which is, I'm pretty sure that's a movie. From a movie. Could be wrong. Hit me up. Again, custom skins. They look awesome. And we got some smaller versions here. I really love this CS Airlines. I think a lot of people are going to get into that and, you know, probably have it flying around their cities. If you do have this flying around your cities, please let us know in the comments below, because I'd love to know if you're going to use them. I'd love you guys to tag me in your flights on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. Hit me up. I'd love to see them flying around your cities. And of course, if you do use these, leave some nice feedback for Bsqiklehausen. He's done put a lot of effort into these, and they're just so damn cool. Get a bit of rain. Let's stop that. In terms of what I've built in this episode, I do want to get into some of the finer details. Some things that I have built off camera is I've plopped down where I would like the domestic terminal to sit, and then the international terminal. I will be getting into these in the next episodes, probably building one of them in each, and then another episode to finish off the airports with a couple of these areas around here. In terms of people getting to the airport, over yonder, beyond that bottom left corner over there, is the downtown Springwood. I'm not going to show you that because the frame rate would just be so terrible, but a lot of traffic is going to be coming from that part of the city, particularly through these highways around here. This highway in particular over here has a junction here to allow people access to get through the city via the airport, and then this one over here is going to serve more of the people who live around this side of the town. For people who do not want to drive to the airport, I also put in this train line that serves the international and domestic terminals. As you can see, a train coming along here, and this train line is going to creep all along here, and it goes underneath this bridge, so it connects through this road here. By the way, this is the Springwood Bridge. It's obviously it's the Brooklyn Bridge, but yeah, screw it. It's now the Springwood Bridge, and I've put this train line just underneath it so that people can actually access the trains can access both sides of the water, which I think works really nice. There you go. There's a train just there. Pretty nice. But I mean, that is pretty much it for people accessing the airport. There's heaps of ways people can get to the airport. I really love the train line because I think it's going to look really nice going above all these suburbs around here. By the way, it's really necessary for me to plan out all these areas before getting into the detail, rather than going into small, rather than building this neighborhood and then this neighborhood and then this neighborhood. I really needed to plan out these areas so that I now know how people are going to access airports and other sides of the river, and the different things I wanted to put on this side. But I mean, that is pretty much it for this episode. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. It's very much appreciated, and if you have enjoyed it, definitely leave some nice feedback at the bottom. If there's anything you think I need to add on the airport, any bits and pieces I've missed, hit me up in the comments as well, because I'll be reading them throughout the week to add them to the airport. But until then, have a good week, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode. See ya.